absolutely nothing.
During the game last night, I did not see that happen. And I promise you, if we had seen that happen, we would have had her back. Unfortunately, this type of thing happens to her every single game. And the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it. That is not a fan account. That is not a social media post. That is a teammate, an active Indiana Fever player, speaking on the record about what it is like to watch Caitlin Clark get targeted night after night while the league looks the other way. And that voice is just the tip of the iceberg of what is now happening inside the Indiana Fever organization.
Caitlin Clark, my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my mamacita, my friend.
Caitlin Clark, my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my mamacita, my friend. Raven Johnson posted that publicly in support of Clark making the All-Star team. And what she got in return was her own community turning against her, questioning her identity, threatening never to cheer for her again, simply for celebrating a teammate.
They're definitely targeting her, and the league and the refs do nothing to protect her.
They are definitely targeting her, and the league and the refs do nothing to protect her. But here is what nobody is connecting. Raven Johnson publicly standing with Clark, a teammate going on the record about the targeting happening every single game, the Alyssa Thomas throat punch, the back injury, and the league doing nothing. All of it has now converged into the single most explosive moment this Indiana Fever roster has produced all season. Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson have looked at the full picture: the injury, the silence, the coaching environment, the institutional abandonment, and told the Indiana Fever organization they will not be taking the floor under Stephanie White until Caitlin Clark gets the justice and protection she deserves. To understand why Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson reached the point of refusing to play, you have to start with the moment that made everything impossible to absorb quietly, the Alyssa Thomas incident, because the specific nature of what Thomas did, combined with the specific nature of how the league responded to it, is the foundation on which everything that followed was built.
Literally to protect her.
You know, knees and cheap shots to the throat. Like if she did that to any of our teammates, we'd be pissed. But they are definitely targeting her, and the league and the refs do nothing to protect her. A knee and a cheap shot to the throat. That is how a real Indiana Fever player, not a media personality, not a social media commentator, a person who shares that locker room every day, described what happened to Caitlin Clark. And the institutional response from the league was a one-game suspension, retroactively upgraded to a flagrant foul that was not called in real time after a throat punch the team described as targeting that happens every single game. And then, Alyssa Thomas went to the press conference.
I'm crazy. The playing the game, being suspended, just the whole narrative that's being painted out there. It's unfortunate that it's come to this over basketball. A lot of us, myself included, didn't even know the play took place until after, the game. And, now we're being painted as thugs and there's death threats out on us. So it's really unacceptable. It's something that needs to change in this league. And I'm just really sick and tired.
Just the whole narrative that's being painted out there. It's unfortunate that it's come to this over basketball. A lot of us, myself included, didn't even know the play happened until after the game. And now we're being painted as thugs, and there are death threats against us. It's really unacceptable. It's something that needs to change in this league, and I'm just really sick of it. She didn't know. She didn't know that a closed fist connected with a player's throat during a play she was directly involved in. And instead of acknowledging what happened, Thomas redirected the entire narrative toward the threats and criticism she was receiving, framing herself as the victim of the response, while the player who took the actual physical contact was sidelined with a back injury. Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson watched that press conference, and what it confirmed for them was something they had both been watching develop all season. This organization and this league were not going to protect Caitlin Clark, not from Alyssa Thomas, not from the targeting, not from the institutional silence that responded to a throat punch with a one-game suspension, and then let the player who threw it stand at a microphone and play the victim. Before the refusal to play became the story, Raven Johnson had already put herself on the line in a way the basketball world was not prepared for. Her public support for Clark's All-Star selection, a simple, direct teammate celebrating teammate moment, produced a response from certain corners of the internet that revealed exactly how toxic the environment around Clark had become.
Caitlin Clark, my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my mamacita, my friend.
Caitlin Clark, my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my mamacita, my friend. That was Raven Johnson's TikTok celebrating a teammate making the All-Star game. In any normal sports environment, that is the most unremarkable thing a player can do. You celebrate your teammate's achievement. You post about it. You show the world that the locker room is unified around the people who are performing. The response Raven Johnson received was not normal.
Brain fried. She's trying to survive that racist environment, so lie for the bigots or go home. Never thought I would say this, but I'll never cheer for Raven Johnson.
Aliens abduct this girl and scramble her brain. Brain fried. She's trying to survive that racist environment, so lie for the bigots or go home. Raven, just stay quiet sometimes. Raven is gone. She has chosen her side. Never thought I'd say this, but I'll never cheer for Raven Johnson again. Never cheer for her again for posting a TikTok about a teammate making the All-Star game. The hostility directed at Raven Johnson for that single act of public loyalty was not about basketball. It was not about competitive disagreement or strategic analysis. It was about who she chose to stand next to and the message being sent. The same message that has been sent to Sophie Cunningham through injury reports and going rogue punishments all season was clear. Standing next to Caitlin Clark costs you something inside this conversation. Raven Johnson heard that message. She understood exactly what was being communicated. And her response was not to stay quiet. Her response, combined with Sophie Cunningham's parallel escalation over the Thomas incident and the broader organizational failure to protect Clark, produced the unified front that the Indiana Fever organization was not prepared for. The refusal to play is not directed only at the league's failure to protect Clark from external targeting. It is directed equally at the internal organizational failure that has been documented all season. And Stephanie White is at the center of that internal failure in a way that makes her inclusion in the demand non-negotiable for both Cunningham and Johnson. Here is the full picture that both players have been watching from inside the Indiana Fever organization. The coaching staff that pulls Clark off the floor at the peak of her momentum. The rotation decisions that consistently interrupt what is clearly working. The post-game press conferences where historic individual performances get absorbed into references to the whole group's resilience. The organizational silence around the smear campaign targeting their own franchise player. And now, on top of all of it, a back injury caused by a throat punch that the league treated with a one-game suspension while the player who threw it played the victim at a press conference. I don't think there's anything Caitlin Clark can say that she hasn't already said that's going to change how they feel about her, or how they treat her. They're still going to hate her. There's nothing she can do. That is the documented reality of Clark's situation as described by someone watching it closely. And the coaching staff's response to that documented reality has been consistent throughout this entire season. Silence, deflection, press conference management, institutional language about the team moving forward together, while the player being targeted absorbs another night of physical contact that the refs do not call, and the organization does not address. Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson are demanding that White take a public, specific, organizational stand in support of Clark. Not a press conference deflection, not a careful institutional response about the team's commitment to player safety, but a direct, unambiguous statement that what happened to Clark is unacceptable, and that this coaching staff will not continue operating as though it is not happening. Until that happens, they are not taking the floor under her authority. The refusal to play is also a direct message to the WNBA as an institution because the targeting of Caitlin Clark that Cunningham and Johnson are responding to did not happen in isolation. It happened within a league-wide environment that both players have watched operate with documented consistency all season.
I don't think there's anything Caitlin Clark can say that she hasn't already said that's going to change how they feel about her, how they treat her. They're still going to hate her.
People are up in arms that Caitlin's not on the 30-year commemorative poster. And then watching her get her ass kicked last night. I do see everyone saying, why does the league not protect this person? It's like she's jealous of her or thinks that because she's a bigger face than anyone the WNBA has had, she won't give her the platform. It's so weird. It's so bizarre. A 30-year commemorative poster that does not include the most commercially impactful player in the history of the league. A league that does not protect its biggest star from being targeted physically every single night. A refereeing environment where Clark shoots 0 free throws in games where other players shoot 20+. An institutional apparatus that responded to a throat punch with a 1-game suspension. And let the player who threw it stand at a press conference and describe herself as the victim. It is a joke. It is a joke. And this is why Kathy and the WNBA are getting lit up on social media, because you are leaving out a generational player, the best player to ever come through the WNBA. I should never be on that. That should be Caitlin. That should be Kelsey Mitchell. That should be Aaliyah Boston. Why are we putting random players on there? Random players. That is an Indiana Fever player, on the record in a published conversation, saying that the league's own commemorative marketing excluded Clark in a way that is indefensible, and placing that specific institutional decision alongside the 1-game suspension for a throat punch creates a picture of an organization that is systematically failing to protect and elevate the player, who has done more for its commercial growth than any single development in its history. Cunningham and Johnson's refusal to play is the most powerful message available that 2 players can send to an institution that has been unresponsive to every other form of pressure. You want us on the floor? Then protect the player we came here to play alongside. One of the most significant voices to weigh in on the environment around Caitlin Clark at this moment came from an unexpected place. Not a WNBA analyst, not a women's basketball commentator, but from LeSean McCoy, a man whose entire professional career was built in the most physically demanding sport in American athletics. Watching the Alyssa Thomas situation, he delivered a perspective that cuts through every comfortable narrative being applied to what is happening. Let's talk about Thomas. Great player. She's from my area. I've been a big fan of her for years. This right here, you know what this is called? This is called sports, professional sports. When you talk about the biggest player in women's basketball history, people are going to talk about you. Simple as that. McCoy is making a specific argument. The scrutiny that comes with being an important player in a league is not something the league or its players get to opt out of managing. When you target the biggest player in women's basketball history, and then stand at a press conference describing yourself as the victim of the response, you are not navigating the reality of professional sports correctly. The biggest player in the history of your league comes with the biggest fan base, the biggest media presence, and the greatest accountability for anyone who chooses to make themselves part of that story. What McCoy is describing is exactly what Cunningham and Johnson are acting on. The targeting of Clark is not just physically dangerous and organizationally tolerated. It is strategically self-defeating for the league itself. Every time a player delivers a cheap shot to Clark and the league responds with minimal discipline, the entire institution takes a reputational hit that costs it the mainstream credibility it has been building specifically because of Clark's presence. The refusal by Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson to take the floor under Stephanie White is not a reaction. It is a specific, organized, demand-driven act with 3 distinct targets and 3 distinct demands. Demand 1. The league must address the Thomas situation with consequences that reflect the actual severity of what happened. Not a 1-game suspension, not a press conference where Thomas describes herself as the victim. Real, proportionate, institutional accountability that sends a message to every player in the WNBA about what happens when you target Clark with the kind of physical violence the refs have been allowing all season. Demand 2. Stephanie White must publicly and specifically stand up for Caitlin Clark. Not through an organizational statement crafted by a communications department. Personally, on the record, in a way that makes it clear the head coach of the Indiana Fever views the targeting of her franchise player as unacceptable and will use every institutional tool available to address it.
Thomas, great player. She's from my area, like suburbs of my area, where I'm from, my hometown. Big fan of her for years, since high school. And her and her brother. Talk about it.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
I don't think there's anything Caitlin Clark can say that she hasn't already said that's going to change how they feel about her. You've got black people trying to pull Raven Johnson's black card for supporting a teammate who made the All-Star game. This is all disgusting, man. Demand 3. The Indiana Fever organization must acknowledge what Raven Johnson experienced when she publicly supported Clark. The online attack on Johnson for celebrating a teammate's All-Star selection is not a separate story from the Thomas incident or the coaching staff's organizational behavior toward Clark. It is part of the same ecosystem, a culture where standing next to Caitlin Clark publicly carries a cost inside the league, inside the media, and inside the online communities that have made targeting Clark a form of identity expression. Both Cunningham and Johnson have now paid that cost personally, and their refusal to play is a declaration that they are no longer willing to pay it silently while the organization and the league continue managing the situation with institutional deflection. So where does this leave things? The Indiana Fever organization is now facing something it has never had to navigate before. Not one player going rogue, not a single press conference comment that generates social media controversy. Two players, one of whom has been the most consistent, documented public ally Clark has in the entire league, and one of whom just had her own community turn on her for the simple act of celebrating a teammate, jointly refusing to take the floor until the organization and the league address what is happening to Caitlin Clark with genuine, specific organizational accountability. The Indiana Fever front office has a window. It is narrow, and it is defined by how quickly they are willing to respond with the kind of direct, unambiguous action that Cunningham and Johnson are demanding. Not another carefully worded institutional statement, not another press conference deflection from Stephanie White, not another social media post from the team's communications department. Action. Real, visible organizational action that tells every player who has been watching the cost of standing next to Clark that the franchise has finally decided which side of this story it intends to be on.
You got black people trying to pull Raven Johnson's black card for her supporting a teammate making the All-Star game. This is all disgusting, man.
During the game last night, I did not see that happen. And I promise you, if we had seen that happen, we would have had her back. Unfortunately, this type of thing happens to her every single game, and the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it. We would have had her back. That was the standard Cunningham and Johnson set for what a teammate's responsibility looks like when Clark is being targeted. They saw it. They had her back, and now they are asking the organization to do the same. Drop your comment. Do Sophie Cunningham and Raven Johnson's demands force the Indiana Fever to finally choose between protecting Clark and protecting the institutional status quo? And what happens to this franchise if they choose wrong? Stay locked in.